Everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday, and today I'm going to be briefly diving into the principles of animation. Now, before I continue, I just want to briefly apologize. I wanted to upload everything by the end of Sunday. Unfortunately, I was having some volume issues. Hopefully, this will all be resolved now. I have been testing it and it seems to be working now, so hopefully it stays that way. So, without further ado, the principles of animation that I'll be referring to in this video is in particular the ones that were developed around 1935 by animators within the Walt Disney Studios company. It was sort of done as a means to kind of expand and really bring forth an education as far as animation is concerned, because it really was designed to kind of elevate the art form in a way that made it just beyond the traditional basics that were at least around during that time. So eventually these techniques are used within 3D animation as well. So they did have a huge influence and really did carry over, even if 2D animation even when 2D animation started to fade away. So it goes to show that no matter what kind of way in which you approach animation, these principles hold a significance as far as really understanding the art form and really understanding or at least the concepts behind creating animation. So I'm going to kind of go through these sorts of various principles. The first one being squash and stretch. And basically this is a technique used where you get disorientation in order to convey physical properties of an object. Now, I think from what I can tell by its definition, this particular principle is trying to kind of play with reality, as oftentimes you will see animation do. They really do try to bring something to life that may not directly resemble something that exists within the real world. And in doing so, you create this kind of illusion of something. I think this one's kind of difficult to explain in the form of an example, but I'm sure there's different explanations that you could kind of come up with if there are any available online. But from what I could tell, it's primarily just designed to kind of really hone in on certain aspects of things, and in doing so create your own understanding of what those things ultimately will look like. The second one is timing, and timing is actually very important within animation, and basically the timing a lot of the times is dependent on where actions are spaced. So it depends, to like how long do you want a character to run, how long do you want the character to be doing a certain action, if you want him to be slow, if you want him to be fast, if you want him to enunciate his words quickly, or if you want him to explain things slowly. So again, those kinds of things are really significant as far as really getting into understanding how you want the timing to ultimately be displayed within the action that is taking place. Third one is anticipation, and this is basically another term for foreshadowing. So again, you'll see similar things that they do, similar aspects of animation that they do use within live action, like foreshadowing. With animation, sometimes this can either be through dialogue or it could be through the actions of characters, and you can kind of get an understanding of what exactly it is they're trying to tell the audience that could possibly occur within the future of events. And it's quite interesting. And oftentimes you'll see this a lot of the times with, I think, the villains, and they'll often say something or do something that reflects onto something that's ultimately going to happen to the hero. Oftentimes, I think animation does that through that context, so it's easier for kids to kind of understand it. But it's also a significant aspect to understanding animation. Also, the fourth being staging, which is another thing that's really important, because with staging, you're trying to get the ideas across clearly in what you're trying to present to the audience. And in order to do this, you need to have a background, a foreground, and action. So it's basically really setting up the stage for a scene. So you have basically kind of like a setting, the characters, and sort of what they're ultimately going to be doing, or what they are what their actions are. All of that is really the way in which something is staged. You could say that this kind of skeleton of staging is sort of the storyboard process, where it's just laid out kind of in a sketched format of, okay, this is what we want it to kind of look like. It's not completely detailed, but it's a skeleton image of the setting and the actions supposedly to be taking place. So that's kind of a really important aspect, because you have to really get across every single little detail, because you are creating it all from scratch. So you really do have to hone in on all of these aspects so that the audience can really get invested into what's going on. Now, on top of that, the fifth one has to deal with follow-through and overlapping action. And basically this means the end of one action builds a bridge to the next action. So let's say a character taps another character on the shoulder or something. That's the first action. But what results from the character tapping on to the other character's shoulder is the other character maybe turning around or something. So it's designed to be a interaction sort of mechanism for the characters. So one character does one thing, the other character reacts to that. And then there's an action on both sides. Again, you're bridging the gap between two things that are going on. And this sort of helps with progressing the story. So once you're going from one thing to the next, which leads to the next thing and the next thing, you're building up the ideas and concepts of the story and really bringing that to the forefront. For number 7, there's slow in and out. Now, this refers basically to the animator's placement of the in-between frames to create various levels of timing and motion. So this often has to do with, how when you're creating a character within animation, you kind of you start off with one position that the character's in, and then you slightly move that position, further and further. So it's really, that part of it is really about really hammering in the details as far as seeing all of the different movements within the various frames of certain actions that you're having the character take. So it's really honing in on those details. That's really important to that specific point. 8th, you have arcs, which are basically visual representation of movement that appears natural. And I guess you could say in that respects, this particular principle tries to make everything that goes within the movements of a character or an action to be, again, they reflect in some ways an understanding of reality and kind of physics and whatnot. Again, obviously you can definitely play around with physics in animation, but it's more so to say to make it look like if this were to happen, would this action somehow, would the movement somehow be reflective to where it doesn't look bizarre, or it just doesn't look off, you know, it makes sense within the context of what you're trying to show to the audience. So I think that's really what that principle is sort of trying to highlight. Number 9 is exaggeration. And obviously within animation you're going to have a lot of exaggeration. It depends on what you mean by a lot, but it can vary from a little lot to completely bonkers and off the wall. But it's all trying to get away from the constraints of reality. So in other words, you are enhancing the character's actions to maybe certain things, in particular maybe even their emotions, in particular their emotional reactions, like, you know, how certain characters, they have eyes that go, you know, sort of out of their head at certain points, and you'll have characters that can run super duper fast, but again, it's just designed to be over exaggerated. It's not designed to be in any way, shape, or form a part of what really a character like that would be running or walking or doing. So it's, again, it's really an interesting mechanism to use, and the animators can do this in a variety of different ways. Sometimes some characters are a little bit more grounded within animation, and they do try to resemble certain parts of reality with maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but there are others that are on the other extreme. So there's a lot you can play around with this principle. And 10, you have secondary actions. So this refers to action that is caused by the action of something else. I think this is sort of similar to one of the other principles that I was discussing, where one action leads to another action. But I think this one is designed to be maybe a little bit more of a cause and effect, like so-and-so gets run over by a car or something. And the effect is that the character is flattened like a pancake or something, or something to that effect, to where it leads to something happening to another character as a result of an action, or thing. So that's kind of what the 10th is really designed, or the 10th principle is designed to be. And lastly, the 11th is appeal. And this one is actually rather important to animation, because you want to design your images in a way that intrigues the audience, gets them interested and invested. In particular, having sort of pleasing actions, stories, and visuals is really what sells animation heavily. And this emphasis on trying to make yourself appealing is oftentimes really influential. For example, Disney is known for having characters that are at least protagonists that they're known for having at least big eyes, and these big eyes kind of are really kind of designed to get you to like and trust the characters. And you'll notice that the villains are kind of the exact opposite. They're not as appealing. They're very rugged and edged. You'll notice a lot of the Disney villains in particular have, like, they just have this, they just don't um, they just don't have that warm and inviting air to them through their appearance. Um, and it doesn't have to necessarily mean being attractive. More so as is, you try to present the character in a visual sense that makes them likable. That's the appeal. It's not necessarily always based upon appearance. Again, difference between appearance and appeal here. So I think I just wanted to emphasize that point. But yeah, this is really the biggest principles that are out there as far as animation is concerned, and they are so influential and important. I think if you really look through the list that I've explained here, they really do highlight really important aspects of animation that really have allowed this genre to thrive and succeed and wow people and really bring forth a not only nostalgia but something that is uh, appealing both to kids and to adults alike, um, and it's what brings animation to life. It's what gives it uh, its artistry, is these core understandings of putting all of these things together, and in doing so, creating essentially a product. And it's definitely safe to say that it has succeeded, and I think it's definitely safe to say that these things that these animators really developed allowed for the genre to ultimately be where it is now. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say as far as these principles are concerned. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.